All right, it could be the toughest job you will ever have, being a caregiver. David Nassaney knows for sure. He has some great information about that. You also have a book that the title alone would indicate a little selfishness.
Yeah, that's right.
Wouldn't it?
It's okay to be selfish if you're a caregiver.
Yeah, the title is I Have a Life Too.
Yeah.
So how did you come to this realization that being a caregiver, the person who's doing the caregiving needs to be cared for as well?
Well, of course, it started out 22 years ago. My wife had a headache, the headache of her life. I mean, she just never had a headache before, and we didn't think much about it. It was only a headache. But then on the fourth morning, for 3 days she had a headache. She asked me to massage her head, so I'm massaging her head, and all of a sudden I noticed that the right side of her face started drooping. And I said, oh my God. I called an ambulance. By the time the ambulance arrived, she had a massive stroke and left her severely speech impaired, paralyzed on the right side. And in that moment, I suddenly remembered the last words she spoke, "Dave, massage my head." And I realized that those would be the last words that I would ever hear her speak. And I suddenly had something in common, I realized, with Henry Winkler, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Hillary Clinton, and Queen Latifah, all caregivers. So I made a lot of mistakes as a caregiver, and I didn't want other caregivers to make the same mistake.
I mean, I think I'm right when I do say it is the toughest job, isn't it?
I can't think of anyone tougher.
Yeah, and it's also tougher for the person who is being cared for. Is there guilt on your part for wanting a life, and is it guilt on your part because you are relying on him so much? Do you know?
You know, there is a grief process, and guilt is a big part of the grief process. I felt guilty because, you know, I wasn't good. I wasn't a good caregiver. I made a lot of mistakes. And she was guilty because I guess she was feeling that my life, you know, and now had to take care of her. So it was hard on both of us. We were both grieving.
Because there are so many people in this situation, what are some good, solid tips that people can latch onto so that both sides are living their own life?
Well, I came up with a CARE formula. So C, communicate with your friends. You know, don't isolate yourself. A, ask for help and be specific. R, rest. Caregivers need 8 hours rest every single night. The average caregiver only gets 2 or 3.
Really?
I can't survive on 2 or 3. Can you?
No.
And E, eat healthy, nutritious food. Don't eat junk food.
Yeah.
Junk food's got chemicals, sugar, processed ingredients. All that stuff will kill you.
Is there a point as the caregiver where you kind of go into a depression?
Oh, absolutely. That was my grief process. It took a couple of years of hell on earth for both of us before we started realizing that, you know, let's embrace the new normal. Let's move on. She came to a point where she realized, you know, I'm still here. God must not be done with me yet. So she reinvented herself. Yeah. She became, you know, this amazing person.
Plate, for one thing.
Yeah, and she just decided, you know, I'm going to live. She's like, she makes us all look like whiners and complainers because she's a cross between Martha Stewart and Wonder Woman. She was before, and she decided, I'm going to do everything that I did before, and that was a lot. She was a hairdresser, interior decorator. She's a gourmet cook. She used to do dinner parties, wedding coordinator.
Charlene is one. Yeah, she is a Wonder Woman.
Yes,
yeah.
And now she does the same thing, but she does it with one arm and one leg tied behind her back and duct tape over her mouth.
And a smile on your face.
And a smile on her face.
Yeah. You've written the book, and as I pointed out, you know, on the surface, it does sound a little cold, you know, and a little selfish.
You know, I did a TEDx talk in Wilmington, Delaware, and I was going to name my book The Selfish Caregiver. And the publisher said, no, you can't do that. Selfish is a dirty word.
Yeah.
I looked selfish up in the dictionary. Nobody would want to be selfish, but the way that was described.
Yeah.
But they embraced it. They said, no, we like that. You know, TEDx is all about an idea worth spreading. So my title over there was, Caregivers Need to Become Selfish in Order to Survive. Selfish is not a dirty word if you're a caregiver. If you're not selfish, I tell you, 30% actually die before their loved ones do, and you're probably going to be one of those 30%.
That's an excellent point. And you point out of the times that you say yes, and the hardest things are the times when you say no.
Yes. Really hard to say no.
I'm sure it is, but you have to have the wherewithal within yourself to do that.
It's kind of like tough love, you know? You just need to have boundaries. If you're always getting offended, people are always crossing that line, it's your fault because you never told them where that line was and the consequences for crossing that line.
You know, it's interesting. You mentioned about rest, and you know how, I mean, I know for myself, you know, when you're overtired, you're not the person you want to be, you know, and that is really very important.
Yes.
But sometimes the hardest thing to do is probably to shut your eyes and turn everything off.
You just have to remember, you know, I brought an oxygen mask. Put your mask on first before you help your loved one with their mask. And I'm saying that's the greatest metaphor for all of life. If you don't take care of you, I can't take care of her.
You're right, yeah. And how's the message been received? You've been doing this for a number of years.
I've been doing it for a long time. I've been appearing on television. This is the 25th show I've been on, from Hawaii to Washington, D.C. I speak all across the country. I've spoken at Harvard with Suzanne Summers and NASDAQ and Coca-Cola, Mercedes-Benz. And wherever I go, it's received well. Now, for caregivers, on the other hand, about a third of them just can't get through their head that their life is more important than theirs, than their loved one. They think that they're supposed to sacrifice and give and give and give till there's nothing left to give, and then that makes them a hero.
Yeah. Well, I am so glad that you stopped by. This is really very important, and I know that people will get the message.
I appreciate you.
Thank you both very, very much. All right. Thanks. We'll take a break. We'll be right back.